At this time, I'll call the York County Transportation Committee for October 21st, 2024 to order. First item is County Council to receive information of funding levels from DOT for fiscal year 24-25.
Thank you, Chair Lady and members of our Transportation Committee. Tonight I have 3 items on the agenda. The first one, as the Chair Lady mentioned, is making you aware of the funding level that we're given this year through the C-Fund program. As you can see on the handout included in your package, our recurring $4,030,000. This year's donor bonus is $863,196.93. And they are going to provide one-time funds this year in the amount of $6,974,500. That brings our total to $11,867,696.93. So as we move forward with that number, the other items will be covered on how we would like to distribute the money and our suggestions.
Thank you, Dean. As I understand it, there's a little bit of analysis being done by staff to take a look at what previous years were and still some follow-up. Is there anything else that needs to be reported on that?
We're still working on that. We're going back and forth with DOT and the Department of Revenue, and we should have more information. So, Madam Chair, you're referencing the donor bonus, and I think for us, it's a lot lower than it has been in the past, so we want to understand why. We've got questions that haven't been answered, and as soon as we have those answers, we're intending to come back to you all and share.
Okay. Is there any action item that you're asking for tonight?
On this first item, no, ma'am.
Just information.
It's just for information purposes so that you know what the funding is that we'll move forward with.
I got one quick question. So on exit 90, the funds that are showing there, is that basically allocation for the for study for the 1.3 mil? What was listed?
When it
there?
comes to the sale, you're going to make those comments?
We're not
Josh?
on that item yet. We're still on number 1. I think you're referencing number 2, Councilman Rodette.
Oh, yes.
So
Yeah.
we'll be prepared, staff's prepared to answer that question when we
Okay,
get to 2.
okay, very
Yep.
good. Okay.
Are there any other questions for staff on item number 1? All right, item number 2 is County Council to consider and approve funding to the State Infrastructure Bank to exits 82, 85, and 90 for fiscal year 24-25.
Yes, ma'am. At this point, we can address what Councilmember Audette brought up. Exit 2, you can see we have a prior commitment to the SIB for $1,574,800. Exit 85, a prior commitment, $5,333,333.33. And then exit 90 in the amount of $1,325,200. The total funding to the SIB that we're proposing from the previous amount that we talked about, this year's funding, the total commitment to the SIB is $8,233,333.33. All right, sir, and what was your question?
Yeah, so the funding on exit 90 is part of, are we looking at that as part of the study that we're going to be utilizing those funds for, or have we really determined that allocation?
Yes, I would.
So the 1 million and change for exit 90, that just goes towards our local match. It's our understanding at this time there's being other state funds committed to do the traffic study on
Okay.
exit 90. So this is just contributing our local match to
Just
the
as a local
project.
match. Okay, all right, very good, thank you.
Any other questions? Is there any action item that we need to take?
Yes, please.
Motion to approve?
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Move now to item number 3, County Council to consider and approve a $500,000 allocation to the SCDOT contingency account for projects programmed in fiscal year 24-25.
Yes, this is one more allocation. We're recommending to replenish the SCDOT contingency account. Please recall, I've been a few times before you, drawn some money out of that. We're getting ready to send a very large package to SCDOT, so we would like to have an adequate contingency fund that we could go to without having an effect on each of your districts.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, motion to approve?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. At this time, I'll call the York County Council meeting to order for the October 21st, 2024 meeting. I'm going to stand for invocation and pledge of allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings that you've given our community. We thank you for the men and women that serve us in uniform, both here locally and abroad. We ask that you protect them and bless their families. We pray for those mourning and for those rebuilding after the natural disasters. We are very thankful for our community standing up and supporting each other. We pray for the unrest nationally and locally. Lord, pray for you to calm the storms, for a revival to happen, for us to turn to you and turn towards you for answers and learn from you as the way to sacrifice and to love one another. And I ask for your wisdom and guidance here tonight as we do the business of the people. In your Son's name I pray, amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to welcome everyone here tonight. I don't even know that I have the public forum session. It looks tonight that we do not have any oath of offices or appearances. So our first item will be the public forum session. This is an opportunity for citizens who come to have 2 minutes. We reserve 30 minutes at the outset. The first 15 folks who come, they can sign up. And it looks like we have a few folks who have done that. When I call your name, if you'll come forward and please give your name and address, and if you'll kindly pay attention to the screen, when the 2 minutes is up, it will flash red, and we ask that you cut off those comments then. First up is Karen Brown.
Karen Brown, 127 Sunny's Way, Fort Mill. So we have been here, I should say, many residents have been coming up on a monthly basis to talk to you about the dog and cat overpopulation problem. And that's what our intention is, to bring this to your attention, and so that you really, really get an understanding of how much of a crisis situation we're in, and that we can't do anything about it. We're just in a reactionary mode, and we need your help. So tonight, instead of getting into numbers and statistics, I really just want to tell you about a very current situation that I personally had. And so I'll set the scene for you. It's McConnell's. It's a subdivision in McConnell's. I was told about a mama dog and puppies that needed help. I drive up. This is the first thing I see is 3 whining puppies, adolescents, in a kennel in the yard. And the whole kennel has got chains all wrapped around it with padlocks. And the whole kennel is filled with poop and flies, and they're crying. And there's a tarp over it, and that was the only positive thing I saw. Okay, so that's the first thing I see. Then I see a mama dog, and she's got 9 puppies hanging on her, and they're and she's trying to walk, and she's got no water. She looks, miserable, as you might expect. So I also see a few more on the porch. But so the neighbors tell me that those 3 dogs that I saw first off are a nuisance. They climb, apparently they can climb up and out over the top, between the tarp and the top of the kennel. They're getting out, they're running around. Animal control has been called out there. They said they call them all the time. And that morning, as a matter of fact, they had killed a cat. So AC had just been out there that morning. So what I find out is those puppies, those 3 little adolescent puppies I only have 10 seconds? Okay, those 3 puppies are the puppies of that mama dog. So we now have the mama dog with 9 puppies and these 3, and I'm trying to find a rescue. I can't find anybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Pardon?
Thank you, ma'am. We
Okay,
appreciate your comments.
Okay, wow, wow.
Catherine Rodriguez. You're on deck.
I'm so sorry, there was an accident, and then I'm terrible with directions, so. Hello, I'm Catherine Rodriguez. There's been an overwhelming.
If you would, I'm sorry, if you
Oh,
would
I'm
just
so
give
sorry.
your address before you
Yes.
start speaking.
Okay, I'm gonna take a breath and just start over.
Certainly.
Okay, my name is Catherine Rodriguez. I live at 1470 Friar Road in Rock Hill, South Carolina. That's the 29732 zip code. There's been an overwhelming increase to the overpopulation of stray animals in York County. And this overpopulation is not just affecting the amount of homeless dogs and cats around our community, but also eating away at shelter, rescue, and animal control resources. With these resources being quickly demolished, it is more difficult for residents to find assistance with pet control. It is contributing to dumping of overbred pets, outdoor animals, and animals that can be no longer cared for. In March of this past year, I came home to find a neglected elderly Cocker Spaniel that was blind and deaf and had been dumped on our road. Just 2 months later, somebody dumped 17 more kittens in the same spot. My neighbor was able to trap 11 of those, one of which passed away, and I was able to trap 5, and one was unfortunately hit. A month again after that, we found another kitten about 2 streets down. Taking in these unwanted animals, I immediately began to realize a problem in our community and facing and having more pets than we have home and resources for. Shelters and rescues were still full, and finding a place for them to live and be taken care of was almost impossible. The overpopulation crisis could begin to decline through requirements of preventative spay and neuter in our county, as well as with certain requirements to pet owners. The ASPCA and similar organizations advocate for the proper spay and neuter practices, resulting in decreasing unwanted litters, lowering animal intake, and euthanasia fees, which frees up resources at shelters and allow the animals in those shelters to have a better chance of finding a home. It would be beneficial to our community to require responsibility of pet owners and spay and neuter their outdoor animals, as well as multiple indoor pets. Spay and neuter requirements in these cases will no longer aid in the cutback of Spay and neuter requirements in these cases will not only aid in the cutback of unwanted litters and potential hoarding cases, but will also prevent mass litter reproduction in high-case areas. An
Thank you,
example-
ma'am.
Mhm.
You went through that very fast. Jess Miller.
Hello, my name is Jessica Miller, and I live at 1687 Nestledown Court in Rock Hill. I am here to beg this council for legislation requiring the community to spay and neuter their pets. I have personally rescued 342 animals, 107 dogs, 229 cats, and 6 bunnies. I have many stories, like the time I spent hours in the dead of winter rescuing starving, dumped puppies who trembled in abject terror at the slightest touch from a human, or the time I spent days catching emaciated, tick-riddled rabbits abandoned at Winthrop Lake. Or the time I raced Junior, a kitten crushed by a car, to a local animal hospital, and as she choked on her own blood and vomited up her internal organs and started to seize in the side of my car, I tried to figure out how I could cough up $250 to euthanize her, since the shelter no longer had a vet on staff to help. This is the reality of animal welfare in this county. Our shelter is tasked with solving a never-ending, soul-crushing problem. They do not have the space or resources to help the overwhelming number of animals in need. Rescues are full to the brim. Good animals with nowhere to go are euthanized regularly, and they are the lucky ones. Many more die from disease, starvation, dehydration, predators, cars, and worst of all, human abuse. We need a real solution to this crisis, and we need it now. The good news, you all have the power to help us fix this problem. You have the opportunity to do exactly what we cannot. Only you. Requiring the community to fix their pets using the free and low-cost programs in this area will save so many lives and end so much needless suffering. Fewer animals in need means fewer taxpayer dollars spent on this issue. It means protecting our natural ecosystems, improving property values, and decreasing unsightly roadkill. This crisis is the result of human negligence, not nature. Please, please help us. The power is in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That concludes our public forum session. I do want to thank the folks who came out to speak to us tonight. It's always strange when we get especially impassioned pleas that it's not the opportunity for us to respond back, but I do want to let you know you've been heard. Do we have any motion on consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve consent agenda. Any discussion? All's in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, consent agenda is approved. We have a very rare situation tonight in that we do not have any public hearings and we do not have any old or new business. We do have committee and other reports, and so we have Chairwoman Allison Love with Finance and Operations.
Okay. Finance and Operations Committee met tonight at 5:30. Present were Councilman Audette and Atkins and myself. And we the motion was made to consider allocation of funds from District 2 to the Faye Bergman Charitable Corporation in the amount of $1,500, to consider the allocation of funds from District 2 to the Roosevelt Community Land and Building Fund in the amount of $2,500, to consider the allocation of funds from District 2 to the Roosevelt Community Watch in the amount of $1,800, and we approved the minutes from the prior October 7th Finance and Operations Committee. It was also a short meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. We do not have any citizen concerns tonight. Do we have any council member new non-agenda comments before we go into executive session?
The only thing I have tonight, I think, and it's really based on the conversation we just had here, you know, in regards to the neutering process, in regards to animal control, et cetera. So I'd like to talk about, you know, what are some of the alternative approaches we could take to this? What are some of the other counties have done in order to manage these issues? You know, I don't know how, do we have a mobile vehicle, like a road show, where actually you can go to communities where you have high populations of animals and maybe, you know, park out some type of roadshow caravan that would bring a doctor out there, or, I mean, a vet, in order to do this stuff. I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box, but I'd like to bring this back to a committee and further investigate this, because obviously what we're hearing today, it's really exploded. So my recommendation would be to bring this back to a committee in order to review and look at options of what we can do to address this. Now, I'm not sure which committee we would bring this back to.
I believe this falls under Public Works. And Bump is not here today, but I think I think the issue will be, I know that staff was working on some updated information for the public to understand what are the services that are being offered, how the TNR program has changed and is being expanded. I think having that information first might help, and so I would ask that staff come back to us. You've listened to this, and I think we've had some good folks promote that, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah,
Then we can
that would be
decide
good.
which
Yeah,
direction to
let's-
take.
We can do that, and we're
Perfect.
actively working on it.
Yeah,
Okay, excellent, okay. And that's it for me, thank you.
but, I mean, I agree with you, but I think that, I don't know if well, most of y'all may not remember years back where we had a similar episode of wild dogs and all that had been turned out and all, and, which we lost some calves and all because of it. And they kill your chickens and whatnot, but if you go to town, you'll see that a bag of dog food now runs from $30 to $70, depending on what people, and they end up turning them out and all. But however we do it, we still got to take in consideration the rights of owners when you say mandatory anything.
Right.
Because some people, if they got a high dollar breed of dog, I mean, so just be mindful of that also. But something does need to be done.
Yeah, yeah, and the whole mandatory thing is not something I'm interested in pursuing. I think it's just the availability of it, and accessibility, I think, and I know you guys are working on a program, so I'd be interested to hear that, yeah.
So I had written down the same thing, and I think we don't have an opportunity to respond to them here in this forum, but I do think that we have an opportunity to respond to their pleas. I've spent almost 8 years on this council, and there's a lot of times I feel like the only animal advocate here, and that's very hard. So there are times I'd like to run around and go down there and give a couple minutes of my time speaking on behalf of the animals. There are a lot more efforts now for spay and neuter, but we would need a convoy of those trucks to resolve the issue. And I think that does need to be referred to Public Works, because we're only delaying the inevitable. If we wait for information, Public Works should probably be the first to hear it. It's going to go to them anyway. But I also think, and I mentioned this 2 meetings ago, that the other issue that we have is that of breeders. And we had a discussion in our planning and zoning meeting a couple months ago, and we were talking about, there is a ordinance that could be changed a little bit. The home-based business part of it, it was the first thing listed on that, and I was very excited to see that on that agenda. And then we pushed that back under the rug when it came up at the next council meeting. So maybe it's on the agenda for our meeting on Wednesday. I'd like to think it is, because during that meeting we did talk about having further discussion on some of those items. But breeding is a serious problem. There are people making, you can't imagine how much money they're making. I've got examples of it. I've got Facebook pages and examples, nothing being reported to the DOR from these folks, and the dogs are not in good conditions. But it's just adding to it's compounding the issue that we have of just more and more dogs. The couple examples that I know of are similar to the ones that have been, what is the word I'm looking for, I guess, saved from a couple areas in Lake Wylie, where you wouldn't really think people in that area, you'd think they'd be a little more, animal welfare oriented, but no, that's where the dogs that have been taken in have been taken from, and it's shocking, when you take 87 dogs and a monkey from somebody, you're surprised what goes on behind closed doors. It's kind of like domestic violence in a lot of cases. You just don't know what's going on in a home or in a backyard. And I think the breeding I think that's the first thing we should look at. And if that's not on our agenda for Wednesday night, I'd like to ask that it be on the next planning and zoning agenda, because it needs to be discussed. And I think this council needs to be aware of the examples that these ladies are familiar with and that I'm familiar with. It's a sad state of affairs. So can we put that on a future agenda?
Well, I guess, I think what's confusing me is that the breeding issue is a Public Works. I'm having trouble understanding how it falls. You talking about planning and zoning?
Yeah, it's the zoning home-based, it's a home-based business, breeders.
As to where they're allowed to be. I think I think if what we can do, and I think this just may be an easier approach, because I think Public Works actually deals with the ordinances that have to do with this issue. And I definitely think it does need to be referred. I just don't like to do that when the council member who does that is not here. But if staff, I've been asking this question all along, and I'll use my time for this as well. I've been asking management put together, since we are getting a lot of these questions from folks, put together the response that you all would give to these folks, since you can't respond to them here, and then we can figure out what the best approach is. And I think even with this question on the breeding, figuring out identifying where that is and finding the right place to put that. I think a report from staff would be extremely helpful to council right now, so that we know what's there.
We'll
And
work
we'll-
on doing that as part of our typical follow-up report, and we can provide that information if we get it sooner before that. But,
Okay.
yep, we're happy to
Just-
do that. There's a number of things we currently do. There's opportunities for other things. Those all come with budget implications, and I think that's just important for you all to consider. There's many things we could do that we don't. We're working within our budget. We're having to explain what we do, and we could have further discussions as we get closer to the budget process, if that's something of interest. But to your point, Madam Chair, the ordinance is a great place to start, and then educating, and then talking through what are things that we might do differently in the future. So we're open to that conversation. We're happy to write up kind of where we're at for you all and share that as soon as we get that done.
I just want to add one little thing to that. breeding situation, there's several that have been reported, but they've been reported to animal control, and they've been reported to the sheriff. And when I looked into this further, they did everything that they could do, but the county has an ordinance under the zoning that allows for what needs to be done. And we looked at it that night in that last meeting. So it's just, we didn't talk about it, but it's just something that I thought was going to come back around. So just look at that ordinance and see.
I think if y'all will pull that and identify what are the ordinances that exist, I think first addressing the questions that these folks keep asking about is number one with the programs that we're expanding. And I know that we constantly get this, so I think it's important to spend a little bit of time is to say that the TNR program, we are expanding that. There are changes. The vet has been hired, my understanding, so I think we're seeing, haven't they? I think just getting all of this on page 1 first, and obviously identifying the ordinances that exist. I think it's also important to understand that a lot of the breeders are inside city limits, and if those are the offenders, our county ordinances do not tackle that problem. And so that's something I think the community should be aware of when they come and talk to us. They may need to go to the city circuits to get that help. Any other council member new non-agenda comments?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. So I have 2 items I'd like to refer to committee. The first one has to do with small business, and this is discussed through the strategic plan under economic development. I was actually at a meeting last week with one of our county businesses and had members of staff actually in attendance at the meeting. We had 5 staff members from the county there. And I think if all of us could have talked out loud in front of the business owner, we would have probably started looking for solutions on how we could help with the situation. So in the strategic plan, we talk about how we could potentially help small businesses, and I think we somewhat agree that, looking at a brand-new business and figuring out how to help them, we do that through the, not the booklet, but what is it that we're putting together?
The small business handbook, the
handbook.
toolkit.
Toolkit, yeah,
Yep.
putting that together. But an existing business, when you think about it, you're running a small business, $5, $10 million a year, small business, and you're looking to expand. So you reach out to the county and you say, hey, I'd like to expand my business, what do I do? So here's what you can do. You can hire someone to come in and help you, and it might be $10,000 or $15,000 for that person to help you. But then once you get into it, you figure out, oh my gosh, for me to do this, I've got to comply with this, that, and the other. I got to pave my parking lot. I got to put a drive box in that's not out on the main road. There are things they weren't even aware of, and they just spent some money to learn that. Anyway, I think there's a better way for us to help a business that's looking to expand, an existing business that's looking to expand. I don't know what the solutions are or what we should even consider, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to refer this to the Economic Development Committee, and then let the committee build the ask to staff to go research this topic and then come back to us with a recommendation that eventually we bring before council for consideration.
Yeah, I would second that, absolutely. I think that's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
I think what I would say, and for folks who don't know, we are doing our strategic plan a little bit differently. And I did meet with folks before, and the first 2 items that we took up in our strategic plan were the economic development and high-performing organization. And out of that strategic plan, one of those was the small business initiative, as was reconstituting the board. There were several things that were discussed, including identification of business parks. I think those things are definitely things that were already identified from that discussion from council, and I certainly have no objection to the committees beginning to work on coming up with suggestions to present to council on that. So I don't have any, does anybody have any objection to that request?
No, this fits in really well with the previous discussions we've had, so it's perfect.
All right, thank you. The second item, a little different, but ironically, that same business owner, as I was walking out to my truck, said, hey, we just bid on something for the county, and we weren't approved. Somebody else from outside the area got the contract. And I got in my truck, and literally my phone rang, and a council member called me and said, hey, I want to tell you what just happened. So-and-so applied to get this job with the county, and he didn't get it, separate from the person I just met with. So within 5 minutes, we had 2 local businesses that were not considered for a job based on what they bid. So here's what I'd like to refer to F&O. and I'm probably not going to word this properly, but I would like for F&O to work with staff to build out a local contractor business preference proposal that council could consider, where we're giving local businesses somehow, some way, a little bit of preference when the bid is so close. Because those businesses are paying taxes in this county, they're hiring our citizens, they're part of our community. So if there's a way to give them a little preference, I think we should. And there are probably some great examples out there that our staff can go explore, come back to the committee, F&O, educate them, and then ultimately you all bring something to council for us to consider too.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would definitely.
Once again, I think this is one of those initiatives that our entire council has said we're interested in looking at, and so I don't know of any objection. Do you have any objection to your committee taking a look at that and staff putting together some options for what that could look like? We'll
Thank
do
you,
that.
Madam Chair and council.
Miss,
So
yes.
do we have to meet in order to request that, or is that something that goes, you go ahead and
I
start?
think the way we ought to approach it is to get staff to do some research, and then when you're prepared to do that, I mean, obviously, we're losing, I mean, these bids are coming in very, very close, and there's a lot of potential positive impact. So I think it's sooner rather than later. This seems like one of those low-hanging fruit, small, I think it's a big thing, but you guys tell me how long you think it will take for you to put that together and
I think we need to meet
coordinate with F&O?
Yeah, I think we need to meet with staff and develop a menu of options for y'all, and then bring to committee. I think one thing I would encourage is we think about the strategic plan, it's a 3-year plan. We obviously want to be responsive, and these are 2 items that we can work on now. But I want us to be methodical, and I want there to be council discussion, feedback in the F&O. So I want to make sure as staff, we're bringing the information that the committee needs to inform, but it's not just one meeting, it's a back and forth
Yes.
to develop something that's helpful for everybody. So I think we'll probably need just a couple weeks to meet with staff to figure out how much work they need to put in, and if they can do it in a couple weeks to a month, to then be ready for a committee meeting. But I do think both of these things are things we've thought about in the past and considered and developed ideas, so I think we should be able to turn something around. Yeah, maybe next month's F&O, we can start on that, so. But I think they're both things y'all shared during the strategic plan process as opportunities and weaknesses, and we're ready to tackle those. So definitely ready to get to work. Just want to make sure staff has time to pull together information for y'all.
All right, let me interject here then, because this is kind of a matter of process, and it might be something that we need to establish as a council. I, like you all, don't like meeting to meet. So the interim economic development director was in the meeting that I was in last week. So he knows, and I've spoken to him, he's in favor of this. He knows what we need to work on. But it was shared with me, as I shared this with our chair, that I wanted to bring this up tonight, our Councilman Christie Cox. I was trying to think of a different way to refer to you, Chairwoman Cox. Anyway. We don't need to meet. So I had suggested we just let them go work on it and then come back to committee and present. But I think it does make sense for F&O to actually meet and share with them what your committee thinks they need to go do, and then you would go put it together and then come back and present it to committee, and then you all would say, well, I'm not sure that really meets what we need. Why don't you tweak this and get this answered and come back to us again before it ultimately comes to council? So what I'm saying is, are we going to have a committee meeting first, or are we going to try to articulate what we're asking staff to do tonight so they can go do it, and then they bring it back to committee?
I think they know.
Yeah,
We've talked
I
about
think
we've talked
this
about this
is
a
the
lot.
beauty of having a new strategic plan, and I think one of the things that obviously is lesson learned from past is that it's always better to have full council have discussion on some of these items so that we get a feel, and you aren't wasting, we aren't asking staff to waste time when there's only 3 people in a committee meeting. That's what we've done. We've already had this discussion as part of the strategic plan, and those initiatives. In my mind, we've talked about this collectively as a group, and now it's time to push that initiative to the committee. So I think it would be appropriate for staff to come up with some information first so that so that the committee knows what they're looking at and start moving
Okay, then,
forward.
I'm going to amend my recommendation then, because when you and I spoke, that's what I suggested, what you're saying, and then we talked about it going to committee, and I was good with that. So I'm going to say, since Mitch was in the meeting, we don't need to meet. We need Mitch to go ahead and work, economic development, to go ahead and work on this initiative, and when they're ready, we call an ED meeting, and then we hear what they've come up with.
I think there's other items on the ED committee, though, other
But
other
this
topics.
particular issue, we don't need to meet to discuss this
until
one.
they have information to
Let's let them
share.
go ahead and work on
But I'll
it.
share an example,
Right.
Councilmember Huckabee. This is one piece of the small business area y'all want us to look at. So
Right.
there's other aspects to that. So I would say, yeah, that's a milestone in our small business focus. And we'll talk about that when we're ready. But there's other things y'all are going to want to talk about related to small businesses too. And y'all prioritized those 4 areas the other night as Madam Chair shared. And I think that falls within one of those 4. When you talk about it as Economic Development Committee, that's up to y'all's, the interim ED director and y'all as you develop the agenda. But I think it's something we can check in with you on until we're ready to have the full discussion. It's not gonna,
Yeah.
we're not gonna have a meeting just to talk about that. There's other
Well-
things in y'all's agenda, and we're trying to move a number of things forward.
But
So,
I think
hear
we're
ya.
missing, I think we're missing the point here. Here's the point. Christie, I'm just going to say Christie. I think we're missing the point. What you said to me today was that you thought, and I hate to repeat our conversation publicly, but I think I have to do that. So you said you thought it made sense for the recommendation to come from council, and then it go to committee. We talked about workshop first, and that takes too long. So we said come to committee, so committee has a say in exactly what we're asking staff to do.
Right, I think the
And then
distinction is,
And then staff would go work on it and bring it back to committee. But I'm okay in this instance bypassing it, but that means we're not establishing a said process. So one topic's going directly to staff, and then they're going to get back with us, and another one needs to go to committee to be vetted.
no, I think what we're saying is, before an initiative moves to committee, it needs to have been approved either by the full council or in a workshop. So we did that in the workshop. What we didn't do, because this is a new process for us, what we didn't do was formally say, all right, Economic Development Committee, you need to go take a look at the Small Business Initiative, reconstituting a public board and identifying properties for corporate areas. Those are some of the initiatives. I think the committee has already gotten some of those things together, but, I mean, I think it's one of those things that we're going to have to figure out what council feels comfortable with, and I think starting with a full discussion of the items so that we know that a committee's not going off on something on their own and that staff has enough information to understand what council wants, then it's incumbent upon you, our county manager, to say, wait a minute, we're not really sure what council wants to do here. We need to get more detail, and if you don't feel like you have that information, it shouldn't be just what the committee thinks, it should be what the council thinks generically, and then send it to study and work on those.
Yeah.
Does that make, so I think part of this is going to be,
It makes sense, but, and I don't want to give examples, but I'm simply saying that if we're going to say we're going to discuss a topic, and if consensus is it needs to be referred to a committee, and it's either going to go to staff and they're going to work on it, bring it back to the committee, or it's going to committee, then it's going to staff. We're going to go one of those 2 directions. I'm good with that. But I think it's important, since this is now a council that is not looking for solutions. We're not coming up with solutions. We're going to staff for the solutions, which is what we should have been doing all along, right? Right? So that.
we're asking them for options.
Yes, we're asking
to
them for
research it,
options
'cause
and
we
to
don't-
research what the
Right.
options are. So if the process is we're going to do one or the other, depending on the topic, we're going to let staff go work on it, or either it's going to go to committee. But you gave a specific example of something that happened in committee.
I think what you're getting excited, I think what you're concerned about has to do with workshops that we're going to have in the future, that we need to get feedback from the full council first, because at our last workshop, there really was buy-in across the board. There really was not much opposition. I think at the point of the full-blown workshop, if it's like, oh, we have a divide and we need to figure out what are the issues here, but I think part of this is just going to be, let's take it one one step at a time as we move through these initiatives, at least for our first meeting on the workshop.
It's not my intention to stretch the meeting out, so I apologize. But no, this is different. We now have 6 priority items to make up our strategic plan. And in the strategic plan, if you've read it and you're familiar with it, which I think every council member is, over the course of the year, you're going to experience things that are in the strategic plan. And it's going to hit you because you're going to be with a constituent that's having an issue. And you're going to, oh, this is one of those items we probably can address short-term in committee. It's not necessarily one of the big items that staff has us working on and has staff working on. So then somebody from council is going to come and they're going to bring it up. But it may not be something that's had enough discussion. So the question is, does it leave here, once we have consensus that we agree it's a topic that should be addressed, should it go directly to staff or should it go to committee and then go to staff?
I think it's going to committee with staff help.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know that that makes a difference.
I'm with you. So
Yeah.
what we're saying is we're okay with staff working on something before the committee
Right.
gives them direction on exactly what they want them to work on.
Right, I feel this is going to committee. This is going to committee.
Ultimately, it will.
Right. it's
Because
going to
we've already
committee.
talked about
Yeah, I
it.
think,
Which I'm good with this.
Yeah.
I'm good with the recommendation. I just want
Yeah.
to make sure we're clear because we're now beginning to put a different process in place than we've operated under in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, to me, this is going to committee. I think at this point, we're in a unique situation because we've had these conversations in essence in some form or manner from within the strategic planning process. So we're actually, our leg up on this one because we can actually come with more information for bringing this to the committee. So I think we're going to committee. I think this is just a unique situation because we've already really had some discussions around this. So,
I'm good with it.
okay, cool.
I'm
Sounds
just
good.
focused on process, that's all, so that we're consistent moving forward.
All right, is there anything?
I agree with you in some cases, but in this case, prior to you being on council, prior to Tom and Tommy being on council, we were on council, and this has been brought up, and Kevin's fully aware of the initiative that council has brought up. Bump has kind of led that charge. But for a few years now, we've had that discussion, so I feel like Kevin's probably pretty familiar with what council is looking, and he can fill in our county manager.
Staff will present to Finance and Operation a recommendation for a local vendor preference. There are tons of good examples out there that we will plagiarize from, and we're going to put together and present to the committee what we believe is a solid recommendation for local vendor preference. And there are plenty of data points we'll draw from. I think we have a very good understanding of what council's desire is. And, you know, once we make our recommendation and present that, if you all tweak it, you won't hurt our feelings, I promise, but we're going to give you a good product to start with.
I won't say anything else. I'm good with it either way.
All right.
Any other council new non-agenda comments? I think everybody's spoken. Do we have a motion for executive session?
Yes, we have two. Receipt of legal advice, legal litigation update, and then the second is receipt of legal advice, fire tax districts.
Do we have a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will move straight into executive session.
I'm trying to figure out if it's gonna be cooler or warmer when we walk out the door.
Yeah.
Which way is it gonna go?
Well, if we're sitting here very long, it's gonna be warmer.
It's not showing on here. We are out of executive session. No action was taken. Do we have any motions?
Yeah, motion for adjournment?
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.